O ye of thy holy government, please lecture us more on fiscal responsibility. After all, these big government liberals know how to spend our money better than we do, right? Do you even for a second think that Letitia James, who once called the NRA a terrorist organization, is really concerned about making sure its donors aren't being ripped off? Of course not. If it was up to her, she would lock up every NRA donor for contributing to what she referred to as a terrorist organization. No, here is what this is really about.
The National Rifle Association, or the NRA, is the largest and most influential pro-gun organization in the nation.
And that video is pretty grainy because it was shot after a hurricane when nobody had internet. But right there in her own words, it's not really about the NRA. It's about you and her ability to control you. Gun control is never about guns. It never is. It's always about control. In the wake of nearly every major shooting, every major catastrophe that involves a firearm, there is a knee-jerk legislation. And like how you should never go grocery shopping while hungry, politicians should never legislate on emotion. Sandy Hook, Orlando, Fort Hood, Aurora, Colorado, Parkland, and many more. What do they all have in common? Guns weren't even allowed in these places, yet the shooter had no problem bringing them in there unchallenged. So in an effort to save us from ourselves with the same competency as the DMV, many tyrants like Letitia James rush in to make it even more illegal for every gun owner to exercise their rights. James and her other radical progressive friends don't like you. They don't like your guns, and they want to take them away, period. They want total control over you, and the only way to achieve that is through disarming you. Nearly every empire, king, government has sought to oppress, control, and even exterminate any subculture has first started with people's right to defend themselves, going back thousands of years. We cannot let people who despise us disarm us. Remember this?
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47.
It would have gone over well, except his biggest mistake was being so honest about it. He was being too direct. Democrats know that gun control isn't popular, especially during many states that they need to win, so they have to talk around it. They say that it's about other things, but shutting down the NRA is about as much as protecting charitable donations as Antifa is about fighting fascism, which is not at all. If these last few months living under a pandemic have made one thing abundantly clear, it's that our Second Amendment is more important than ever. Likely, why gun sales are up over 100%. The whole reason we have a Second Amendment is that so when the tyrants rear their ugly heads, we can remind them who is actually in charge. Folks, the stability and the prosperity of us that we enjoy keeps law and order. But when someone has more to gain than to lose, conflict will arise. And I, for one, want to be prepared when conflict does, don't you? There are leaders in this country who got a taste of total authority, absolute. And now they're unwilling to let any of it go. You see, once government takes something from you, they never give it back. And the seizure of control in this pandemic is no different. Bureaucrats have once again used short-term tragedy to institute long-term legislation. We see it all the time. You haven't been able to attend a proper church service in months. Many people have had to forego even saying goodbye to loved ones who laid in the hospital alone. Weddings postponed, baptisms delayed, graduations canceled. And I can't take a train without wearing a face mask. They love it. They love the power. Folks, 250 years ago, we fought the Revolutionary War over a 2.5% tax hike in a breakfast beverage, in tea. Wake up. They love controlling you. And it's always done under the guise of everyone's best interest. Meanwhile, this country has absolutely fallen into chaos. While you, the law-abiding people, are made to stay home and twiddle your thumbs, we're going to flatten the curb. That was supposed to last 14 days. Here 4 months later, as the most powerful economy ever comes screeching to a halt, hooligans and thugs are allowed to burn and ransack in the streets. They're allowed to burn courthouses, everything in sight, while not wearing a mandated mask. But Democrat leaders sit back and ignore the blatant double standard. And now, as they work to gut police forces across the country, they also want to make sure you and I have no last line of defense for your family and yourself. These are criminals. It's insanity. We've seen it all before. Freedom is something that must be jealously guarded. And when you ease up on it, even just a little bit, it gets killed. Some examples, you say? Hogwash, how could that be true? Folks, let's look back. The USSR was formed in 1922. What happened in 1918? Well, they passed a law that said you either give us your guns or we're going to throw you in jail for 10 years. And then they take them anyway. When a population is disarmed, it does not take long for tyranny to spread. An estimated 15 million people were killed under the Soviet Union. And for everyone but the elite government bureaucrats, life pretty much sucked. Cuba's another example. This is what the left loves. They adore Fidel Castro. They make sense that he loves all the same things that they do: harassing, intimidating your political enemies, destroying healthcare systems, and of course, outlawing guns. Fidel Castro, the government started by targeting rival revolutionary groups. Now, Castro, the government, broadened the definition of rival revolutionary groups to disarm more of the populace. Does this sound familiar? Since then, hundreds of thousands of people have been murdered by the Cuban government, and millions have fled from the island. And of course, there's Venezuela. We can't forget that. What once used to be the wealthiest nation, one of the wealthiest nations in the world, abundant resources, is now a wasteland of human rights abuses. When individuals are not allowed to protect themselves, only death and destruction can follow. Venezuela is no exception. Venezuela banned the sale of firearms and ammunition in 2012 under the guise of fighting crime. Does this sound familiar? Any of it? It's exactly the same strategy Democrats are using here in America. They say they're trying to fix some injustice somewhere, and that's why they need to enact more gun control legislation. Folks, nothing good has ever come from banning guns. Crime is already too high, so we have to take your guns, they say. Mental health isn't where it should be, so we have to take your guns. The political organization we hate is being run in a way that we don't agree with, so we have to dismantle it and take away your guns. And it will work if we let them. Folks, we can't allow them to destroy the Second Amendment. Believe me, that's the objective here. They're open about it. And they think bringing down the NRA will put a stop to your silly little love affair with the Second Amendment. But they couldn't be more wrong because they don't understand. Because they want power. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It couldn't be any clearer. And the NRA is the biggest bear in the fight for liberty. Make no mistake. That's why they want to take them down, because they can't beat them.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.